Welcome back. Some breaking news just to recap on. The anti-abortion activist Livia Tossici-Bolt has been found guilty at Poole Magistrates Court of 2 charges of breaching a buffer zone outside an abortion clinic in Bournemouth.
Now, some will see this as a threat to freedom of expression. Well, joining us now, GP and medical writer Dr. René Honderkamp, also broadcaster and commentator Judita De Silva. Now, I'm going to start with you, René. Before I do that, I will share a story. That actually I was, when I had my son, I was thinking I wasn't going to have my son. And I went to one of those clinics and I went 3 times. And the 3rd time, there was somebody like her there and they changed my mind. And so I didn't find that was an affront of anything. I'm glad they changed my mind just because they had the pictures of all the fetuses and then that person there and I just thought...
I know. It's really hard. I'm torn over this because I believe vehemently in a woman's right to choose and, shape her own destiny. I also believe in the right to protest and to express your view otherwise. I think if somebody's just standing outside a clinic and hasn't got pictures of fetuses, I don't agree with that.
Well,
but it's just standing.
She didn't have them, but there was
whatever.
like a row on the way.
I think that's perfectly fine. And I think the moment we get into arresting someone for praying in their own head, we're on very dangerous freedom of speech territory. Having said that, I think no woman ever goes through an abortion glibly or easily. It's a very difficult decision and they probably should be left to their own devices.
So Judita, she's 64 years old and she was holding a sign saying, and I quote, "Here to talk if you want." So that's what she was doing and that's what she's been found guilty of.
If that is all, because I'm not familiar with this situation, if that is all it was, I think that they're just making an example of her. We don't know, did she accost someone? Did she talk to a woman? When
it was a buffer zone.
This is her, the District Judge, Orla Austin, has told the courts that she lacks insights that her presence could have a detrimental effect on the women attending the clinic, their associates, staff and members of the public. And the judge went on to say, "I accept her beliefs were truly held beliefs, although it's accepted this defendant held pro-life views. It's important to note this case is not about the rights and wrongs about abortion, but about whether the defendant was in breach of the Public Spaces Protection Order."
Okay, if she's in violation, she's in violation. I think that this is the wrong case to make an example of, but I completely agree with everything you've said. I feel very tender about the issue because for a woman to be making that choice, it's probably the worst moment of her life. Leave her alone to get through it. The last thing she needs is judgment being hurled at her. And yes, she's saying, "I want to talk." You don't know the conversations those women have had. By that point, they just need to be left alone to go through the worst time for their mental health.
I'm not so sure. Listen,
I feel how you feel, but don't impose it on another person.
If there's a buffer zone and she was not outside that zone, then I get it. There's a rule, so that's it. If she was within that zone and that's what she's guilty of, then that is fair enough. As for whether she should be anywhere near there, inviting people to talk and things, I have no issue with that at all. She's allowed to do that. But if she did breach the rules, which say you need to be within a certain distance if you want to do that, then that is another question, because the rules are there.
It's 200 metres or something.
I mean, I don't know whether I agree. I think that's fine, fair enough.
I've always found it just so bizarre that is the point at which you choose to confront a woman making that choice.
I don't think that...
It isn't, I've always found it do you really feel that the way you're going about your right to protest on this particular issue, that's the best way to do it?
Well, for me, it was.
They would argue. I think it's a beautiful moment that you described, but that is rare.
No, I think there's probably more. I don't think it is.
So the pro-life campaigners, and I've spent a lot of time on this, would argue that quite a few women, if they get the opportunity to talk, if somebody can explain to them that there will be support for them, etc., which they offer, then many of them will change their mind because they're literally teetering on the edge. So, I'm completely torn on this. I'm completely torn on a woman's right to make the decision and to be left alone to make it. But at the same time, if all they are needing, I'm also very pro people having babies, if all they are needing is a bit of support to know that it's out there, then...
I wish they would do it in a more palliative way, as in offer that, saying that just come and have a conversation if you're teaching. That should be the rhetoric around these kinds of protesters, as opposed to what we see all the time, which is the yelling with placards outside the clinics.
Well, listen, J.D. Vance said it was an affront to freedom of speech, what is happening to her. Do you think it's an affront to freedom of speech?
I don't think it's an affront to freedom of speech because the grounds on which she was found guilty, she was in violation, so that's a different situation.
Yeah, well, I agree. So she was if she had violated a space that she shouldn't have been on, then that's almost like a kind of trespass, I suppose, with what is agreed that we as a nation say is acceptable. So that is breaking the law. So if she breaks the law in that respect, then yes. But just holding a sign up and warning people outside a clinic if you are outside the bumper zone.
Well, we've just had a statement through from the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, and the chief executive says that they welcome today's verdict and will protect women and staff who provide abortion care. She says the particular clinic in Bournemouth has been subjected to decades of anti-abortion protests, which resulted in more than 500 reports of harassment. And I think that's a case of, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of women, but clearly it's a very difficult situation for them.
It really is. And, you know, when you're trying to make that decision, you probably don't want to be bombarded with pictures of fetuses or people shouting at you. But it's very difficult to reach these women before they get to the clinic, isn't it? Because you don't know about them. You don't know about the grappling.
Think about social media. Yeah. About the kinds of way you can reach millions of people. And, think about Peter, when you present yourself in a certain way that we are all about conversation at the hardest moment of making the choice. Before you go there, come and talk. We're not going to do anything. We just want to have a conversation. But when your rhetoric, your imagery, the whole optics of your movement is this hostile approach to people in a delicate state, it doesn't do you any favours.
Maybe another way of doing it is to be having people within the clinics themselves that you pass through to just have some counselling and discuss it with you and spell out some of these options.
They do have that. Some of them do actually have that. Look, I don't really... like I said, I don't have any problem with... Because it wasn't her, the person who approached me didn't have the fetuses. It was like, as you went up to the clinic, there was a picture of the gestation of what the baby would look like at each stage. So that was outside the clinic. That was not to do with this person. But for me, the bottom line is, if she's broken the law in terms of the boundary, then that is how it is. And it's not really freedom of speech or anything. It's more about... But
we've heard Vice President of the US, J.D. Vance's thoughts on this, saying it is a violation of free speech. And we know, of course, that the Labour government is trying to get a trade deal with the US after all these tariffs.
Yes, but does he know all the details?
Well, probably not.
Well, I mean, J.D. Vance is not exactly chapter and verse on facts. This is someone who described Britain as some prehistoric nation that hadn't been in a war recently. Let's not use J.D. Vance's chapter and verse when it comes to providing a bird's eye view on the morality of any particular situation. He's not a very well-informed individual.
But perhaps what he's saying is that our laws are in violation of freedom of speech, that the buffer zones, and I'm sure he would, is a violation of freedom of speech. And that's a different conversation. It's not about this individual woman, it's about the buffer zone. And that is a different conversation because then it takes you back to people being in prison for Facebook posts.
Now, some will see this as a threat to freedom of expression. Director, Family Education Trust and former Executive Officer of Right to Life, Peter Williams, joins us now. Peter, what do you make of this particular ruling?
I just think it's symptomatic of the broader injustice of saying that we're going to criminalise people for offering help to women or offering an alternative perspective on what is going on in particular places around the country. I mean, this is a woman who was not blocking a highway. She wasn't doing any harm to anyone. She wasn't harassing anyone by shouting at them or calling them names. All she was simply doing, as far as I can see, according to the reports that we've heard, is offering support, offering an alternative perspective. I'm here to talk. That's literally all she was saying, and that's what we're criminalising.
Yes, but no. That's not what they're criminalising. They're not criminalising her holding the placard. They're saying that she breached the buffer zone. So there's a zone with which you can protest, and she was not outside that. She was not. She was basically within it.
Yeah, so you're criminalising someone in a given space, but you're nonetheless criminalising them simply for engaging in what is otherwise freedom of speech. And I think that's quite wrong.
No, but she's not in the right space, though, to do that.
Is the problem.
No, but nobody's saying that she can't complain.
That's okay, but the rule is what I'm challenging here. The rule is wrong, because a rule that says that you shouldn't be able to offer help to women in a given space is a ludicrous piece of legislation, a ludicrous example of government overreach. And it was only in place because the abortion lobby, which hates people who oppose abortion, wants to stop them from providing that alternative help and that alternative perspective to women. And that's the fundamental issue here.
Peter, the British Pregnancy Advisory Service has released a statement in the last few minutes, and they claim that that particular clinic in Bournemouth has been subjected to decades of protest, but also resulted in more than 500 reports of harassment. So presumably that is why the buffer zone was set up in the first place.
Well, we're actually just trusting their word on that. It's interesting that there's never been any pictorial evidence or videographical evidence of genuine harassment going on. Now, I've been to a lot of these different kind of protests. Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't agree with from a simply pragmatic perspective. I'm not sure that using aborted fetus pictures outside of abortion facilities is necessarily a good idea. Irrespective of what you think about those on a pragmatic level, I've never once, in all the times I've been, and I've been to plenty of them, seen any kind of shouting at women, any kind of judgmental behaviour beyond the broad, we don't think that abortion is right, it's wrong. There's never been any harassment that an ordinary person...
But that's just what you've seen. But that's just what you've seen. You can go by what you've seen.
Absolutely.
But this is what people are saying. But what about the women going into the clinic? Now, that's all very well. Everybody should have an equal right to their own space to contemplate whatever it is they want to contemplate. But when there is a border that is set there that says, look, you can do your thing there, and we'll do our thing over here. This is the line that you do not cross. This gives everybody an equal space to have their own freedoms. What is wrong with that? That's called the law, isn't it?
Well, the law can be wrong. The law can be right, it can be wrong. In this case, I think it's wrong for the simple reason that if you say we're going to have this space where no one may engage in the kind of activity that we're talking about, so offering help to women or providing an alternative perspective, what you're actually doing is chilling speech on the one hand, because the idea there is the speech is there to help the women who are going in. It's not just there to broadcast the line against abortion.
You think you're helping, but you might not be helping. But Peter, you might not be helping.
Can I just say, if you go to the Be Here For Me campaign, which is a group of women who were helped by these kind of protests and these kind of actions, then I think you'll find plenty of evidence of women who have been served precisely by this kind of freedom of speech.
Well, listen, Peter, it helped me.
That's what's being stopped here.
Peter, it helped me because I didn't have the abortion I was going to have because somebody was out there. But I don't think that was bad. They weren't in my face, and I'm glad that I was influenced by that. Peter Williams, thank you very much. Lovely to talk to. He's the Director for Family Education Trust and a former executive for the Office for the Right to Life.